the regular meeting for the Planning Commission for the town of Gilbert. Can I get a roll call?
Chairman Joshua Ayler.
Here.
Vice Chairman Christopher Sipple.
Present.
Commissioner David Blazer.
Here.
Commissioner Carl Bloomfield.
Here.
Commissioner David Cavaney.
Here.
Commissioner Brett Muddy.
Here.
Commissioner Jennifer Whitman.
Here.
Great. Thank you. Item number 4, now we can have that motion for approving of the agenda.
Your Honor, one quick question. Linda, number 6, I forgot to ask this. It wants to be continued to November 5th. Should I just skip that one altogether? Or mention the continuance?
You can note the continuance when you list it under the consent motion.
Okay, I will. All right. In that case, Your Honor, I move to approve. I move to continue S14-10. I move to approve S14-07, S14-09 with the preliminary plat modifications
I
presented.
think you're just approving the agenda.
Yeah, you're just approving.
recommending approval.
Look at how I
We're doing
had
it
it
twice. We did it in study
We're doing it
session, but we
twice.
just need to.
Okay. In that case, I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion to approve the agenda from Vice Chair Sipple and a second from Commissioner Whitman. Can I get a vote for approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Okay, now we're on to item number 5, communications from citizens. At this time, members of the public may comment on matters not on the agenda. The Commission's response is limited to responding to criticism, asking staff to review matter commented upon, or asking that the matter be put on a future agenda. Is anyone here that would like to speak under this matter? Okay, I see none. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Before I move to the consent agenda, if you'd like to speak on a matter that's on the agenda tonight, there's blue cards or green cards out in the back. If you could fill them out, put your name, address, and then bring them to the front table, and we'll be able to have you speak tonight. So, to the consent agenda.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Not yet. Never mind.
Okay. The consent public hearing items will be heard at one public hearing. After the consent public hearing, these items will be approved by a single motion at the request of a member of commission or staff. An item may be removed from the consent calendar and may be heard and acted upon separately. Other items on the agenda may be added to the consent public hearing and approved under a single motion. Okay, so on the consent agenda, we have item number 6, which is asking to be, which is S14-10, which is asking for a continuance to November 5th. Item number 7 is S14-07, which is asking for a continuance to November 5th. Item number 8 is S14-09, a request for approval of preliminary plat near McQueen and Elliott. This has an amendment to the exhibit, which we received from staff, which we'd accept into as the changes for this approval. Item number 9 is UP 14-07, a request for conditional use permit, approximately 2.5 acres at 2401 East Baseline Road, which is a 55-foot monopole palm. Item number 10 is UP 14-08, which is a request for conditional use permit near Higley and Elliott, which is also for a 60-foot high monopole. Item number 11, we would be pulling to a separate.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Make sure you're pulling it.
Yeah, we'll be pulling it to a separate vote for conflict issues. Item number 12 is pulled to the non-consent. Item 13 is a Z14-17 request for rezoning approximately 13.1 acres near Chandler Heights and Val Vista. And then adding to the consent is item number 14, GP 14-09, Warner Power Senior Living, which is a minor general plan amendment to 19.67 acres Power and Warner Road. And then also item number 15, which is Z 14-19, which is a companion case to the Warner Power Senior Living and a request to rezone 19.67 acres. Can I get a motion? Or we already had the motion?
You would need a motion.
Okay. Yes.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented by yourself.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Sippel and a second from Commissioner Whitman. Can I get a vote for approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Number 11.
Passes 7-0. Now,
I was going to make the other motion.
well, let me read it in,
Okay.
and then we have to have
Yep.
discussion. So item number 11, which is also consent but under separate vote, is item UP 14-09 for a request for approval, conditional use permit for .87 acres, and the use permit is to allow vehicle services. And so, Commissioner Muni?
Chairman Ayler, I will be abstaining from this vote since the applicant is from the company that I work with.
Okay. So can I get a motion with that?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move to approve UP 14-09.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Sippel and a second from Commissioner Blazer. A vote for approval.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0 with a abstain from Commissioner Muni.
Yeah.
Well, there.
Okay, now moving on to the non-consent agenda. The non-consent public hearing items will be heard at an individual public hearing and will be acted upon by commission by separate motion. During the public hearing, anyone wishes to comment in support of or in opposition to the public hearing item might do so. If you wish to comment on a public hearing item, you must fill out a public comment card indicated the item number you wish to be heard upon. Once the hearing is closed, there will be no further public comment unless requested by a member of the commission. And that will take us to item number 12. Jordan Fell.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Unfortunately, Nathan Williams couldn't be here today, so staff is covering for him. The project itself was reviewed by the Planning Commission at the August study session. There have been no substantive changes since that time. At that study session, the Commission generally gave its support for this project. There was minimal discussion. The discussion that did occur was related to the Roosevelt canals that surround this property, and it is actually the issue that the adjacent property owner is here to speak to this evening. So this is the request. I won't reiterate any of this. Again, the request has not changed. The site itself, the proposed development plan. So at issue is, I'll find a good aerial here. So at issue is the idea that these lots along the west side of 156th Street currently have a canal, a Roosevelt Canal, that they get their irrigation from. As part of this development, the developer will be building a new lateral along the northern property boundary of the development to make up for the loss of canal that will occur with the subject. The applicant, I believe, has done well to work with the adjacent property owner who has the concerns. It's in the applicant's narrative that this replacement transmission line, or excuse me, lateral line will get built with the subject development. And finally, as we all know, the town can't compel the Roosevelt Irrigation District as another political subdivision to do something. So at the end of the day, the town's role in this is just making sure that whatever easement is necessary in the plat to provide the new lateral for the existing canal, that we work with the developer, the district itself, and make sure that that happens. Outside of that, it will really be an issue between the property owner, the developer, and Roosevelt Irrigation District, and any specific issues. But all that said, as the request hasn't changed, I'll keep my comments to what I've already said and defer any time to the person who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Fulm. Anybody have questions for staff? Thank you. And do we have the applicant here? Or, okay,
The applicant is here. I don't know if you're wanting to speak.
okay. Well, let's go ahead and have the public come up. Bradley Pondy? Sorry. Yeah, if you could have your name and city of residence for the record.
My name's Bradley Podani. I live at 25420 South 156th Street in Gilbert, Arizona. I've met with or talked to your staff, Jordan, and I've talked to Drew with ESP or EPS group about this. And on the item, my concern is to get on the public record that the canal does get put in there. I understand the easement is there. What I don't want to have happen is that my land end up dry, okay? The developer, I understand, will be responsible to put in that lateral ditch that they're going to do, but when they go in there and build on that 31 acres, if they disturb the existing ditch that's there, I have no way to get water. And I don't see any place in the staff recommendations as to when. Is it before the development develops or after the development develops as to whether RWCD or the developer has to put that lateral canal in there? And that's my really only concern. I don't think that the canal's ever going to go dry, but I wanted to get on public record so that I knew that at least it's out there, okay?
All right, thank you. Jordan, do you have anything to that?
Just that the staff's understanding is the district won't allow for demolition of the existing lateral until the replacement lateral has been commissioned, tested, ready to go. Beyond that, again, we can't compel another political subdivision to do anything other than what Roosevelt has offered as their process.
Okay, thank you. Does commission have any questions for staff or public? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Muni.
I just like a little clarification. If I look at the EPS site plan, I'm not sure how to identify it. It's dated September 4th. It shows along that northern boundary a 30-foot landscape setback and trail connection. And so I'm looking at the black and white site plan. So that's a 30-foot. If I look at the colored site plan, it calls for a 10-foot irrigation tract. So I'm just curious if there's one of the two is prevailing over the other, and if it is indeed consistent with providing for the irrigation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Moody, my understanding is there's a 30-foot landscape setback within which a irrigation easement will be included.
So the landscape setback exists within the rear part of some of the parcels?
The landscape the landscape setback, that track is separate from the individual parcels. My understanding is the irrigation easement will be within that common area landscape track.
Maybe I'm not following the map correctly. It just doesn't appear that this colored one provides for 30 feet. It provides for 10 feet along the back. And then it's, everything after the 10 feet is a lot.
I guess the site plan I have up on the screen right now, dated 9/4. Come on up. Yeah.
Commissioner members, my name is Drew Huseth. I'm a land planner at the EPS Group, 2045 South Vineyard, Suite 101, Mesa, Arizona, 85210. To provide a little clarity, what I want to do is just briefly show a copy of the old development plan that was previously approved.
Oh.
And on this development plan, there was previously a 10-foot landscape setback along the north side. So our request here tonight is to change the zoning from this development plan, which had a 10-foot landscape track along the north, to this development plan for the development of 63 lots, 90 by 140. To provide a little clarity, there will be a 30-foot landscape setback along the north. Within that 30-foot landscape setback will be the proposed irrigation easement lateral, which will maintain existing irrigation services for all existing residential property owners along 156th Street to the north.
Just to clarify, Drew, punch me in the head if this is wrong, but the track is located outside of the lots. The 30-foot landscape track is not part of the lots, therefore the irrigation easement is not part of the proposed lots.
I understand the discrepancy now. Thanks.
Okay. And any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay. Okay, I'd like to close the public hearing and bring it back to the dais. Do we have any discussion or a motion?
Commissioner, I move that we approve Z1408.
Second.
I have a motion to approve, I got to get back to Z1408, and by Commissioner Bloomfield, and a second by Commissioner Muti. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Item number 16 is Z14-19, or sorry, item number 16 is UP 13-04, and being heard at the same time with case item number 17, Z13-08. Jordan Feldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Planner Williams picked a great time to leave the continent. I will be covering Z1308 and UP 1304 as well. Since the Commission's hearing of 1308 and the use permit at the last meeting, there's been a few changes, and I'll identify those. But generally speaking, what you saw and heard at the last meeting is still the case today. Here is the site. You can see with the bifurcated parcels, the original, I guess, concept plan that was developed for this site. And just to spend a second on this site plan, again, pushing the parking areas within these larger building footprint areas to minimize the view of parking off-site, creating essentially these footprints, these pods throughout the parcel that enables less pavement, more green space. I mean, those are some of I think, the key takeaway points from this original concept plan. And then the kind of gradual transition through mixed use between the whole thing. And as has been stated, a lot of these ideas, these concepts, were tied together by the Banner parcel, which of course is not a luxury we enjoy today. So moving forward to today's proposed site plan for both the northern, what would be a commercial parcel, and eastern multifamily parcel, their connectivity, their access master plan, there was some discussion as to whether or not these connection points were going to be going forward or carried through these plans. They are. The original kind of open space plan, trail system, the elevations. Nathan did a nice job of putting together some summary points from the last Planning Commission hearing, and I won't take your time by reading through them. So since last month, the applicant has made a few tweaks, listened to what the Planning Commission talked about in terms of possible design changes that might bring the project closer to what was envisioned. And so one of these changes is the addition of a 3-foot screen wall along Palm, essentially wherever you see the red line. So there would be essentially this kind of transitioning at the street where a much more pedestrian-friendly, shorter wall would secure the property, and in that way give it a little bit more feel of permeability, if you will. They've also identified the wrought iron, 6-foot wrought iron fence that was suggested to provide, I guess, edge treatment along the future pedestrian path. And then finally, these green nodes, which are kind of tough to see on the projector here, but they've created these essentially pedestrian enhancement areas where these pedestrian entries go into the proposed development. They'll have enhanced hardscape, enhanced landscaping, benches, etc. They've also done well to put some more landscaping thought into, again, kind of the public realm, the more visible areas of the development, and I'll let the applicant speak to more of these details when they come up. But generally speaking, with respect to the use permit, have these, are these tweaks desirable? Absolutely. Do these tweaks take us to the level staff was expecting for this site in terms of the 4 findings behind the use permit approval for multifamily and RC? No, it does not. So staff's recommendation on the use permit is still denial. For the rezoning, for similar reasons, and including maybe not as well discussed last time or identified on this slide, moving away from the residential piece to the commercial piece, the idea of approving RC without a true site plan gives staff concerns as well. So we still would recommend denial on the rezoning case as well. With that, I'd take any questions at this time, but certainly would like to defer as much time to the applicant.
Do we have any questions for staff?
So just a summary, I guess, really quick. The changes were on-site relative to fencing.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Whitman, there's kind of more landscaping, more thought about the landscaping at the pedestrian entry areas, as well as the streetscape itself, the aesthetic of the streetscape, trying to use the lower fence wall with additional hardscape landscaping features to, again, try and make it at least feel more pedestrian oriented.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the applicant?
If you push down hard on these buttons.
It's quite the production. Couldn't have used the table in its normal spot.
Sorry for the slight delay there.
It's all right. In giving, kind of definitely focus on the changes from our last hearing that we had, Commission.
We intend to do that.
Great.
There are two things, excuse me, my name is Paul Gilbert. I live in Phoenix. My address is 701 North 44th Street. I'd like a clarification at the outset, if I might, Mr. Chairman. When we reasoned together at the last hearing, we only focused on the change in the site plan. You specifically requested, you as a body, that when we come this time, we discuss the conditional use permit as well as the change in the site plan. Both of those items are on the agenda. Frankly, in my humble opinion, the issues are analogous to both cases, and I only intend on giving one presentation addressing both issues because they're so integrated and interwoven. If that's acceptable, I'll proceed on that predicate.
It's acceptable.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm scratching my head a little bit about how to present this case. I was so long in the tooth last time presenting it to you, I started to getting these ho-hum looks in the course of my presentation. I wish to avoid that, and yet there are some things that are important enough to this case that I think they bear some repetition. Also, I think that we're operating on a very different rudimentary understanding here this evening, because when we were here before, almost to a person, based on the review of our very complete notes of the hearing, almost to a person, this commission took the position that multifamily was an appropriate use on these premises. The issue dealt with how to do it. And the issue dealt with also whether we could meet the conditions of the conditional use permit. But there was a commonality of understanding, and you will hear that from me, perhaps for some of you ad nauseum this evening, that the direction we clearly got from our last meeting was that multifamily was an acceptable use on this site. So, operating on that predicate, let me begin. First of all, our request will allow for an integrated mixed-use plan. I remind you at the outset that if you want mixed use, then you have to have a residential component. If there's no residential component, it is not mixed use. What was approved on this site originally was a true mixed-use plan. We are here with a very different plan, and we'll talk about the old plan some more this evening, but we are here with a different plan than what's approved, but only by putting multifamily do you comply with and honor what is now approved on the site. Secondly, laying the predicate for further discussion this evening, I want to emphasize that we are zoned RC, and that you have adopted, you in the collective sense, the city of Gilbert, has adopted an ordinance that requires compliance with the old site plan that has over 1,200 units. That's your ordinance. So as we reason together today, I ask you to focus on the fact that you have an ordinance that is currently in effect, in full force and effect on this property, that suggests there be 1,200 units. That makes this case, I think, a very different case than if we were starting all over or coming in from scratch. The other thing that I want to talk about is that a decision was made that made it very difficult for us to go forward. That decision of which we were here in full support, and we're not denigrating from that approval, but you approved Banner. Banner was located on the middle parcel. Banner didn't change the zoning, but Banner came in and said, we wish no longer to be part of this RC master plan. We want the RC zoning. And they even agreed to, I think it was a PAD on their site, but they said, we want the RC zoning. We want out of the plan that requires we be integrated. Banner said unequivocally, we don't want integration, we want a standalone parcel. You as a planning commission, frankly, unlike the city council, saw the difficulty of that coming and raised the question, and the minutes show you discussed it among yourselves. Admittedly, not all of you were on the commission at the time, but the discussion was, if we approve Banner and don't require any integration and remove them from the conceptual site plan and allow them as a separate standalone parcel, what are we doing to our requirement that this project be integrated? The question was posed, briefly and frankly superficially discussed, but never resolved. But you knew what you were doing when that happened. Therefore, I come before you this evening with the same ordinance, the same approved plan that still exists on this property, but with a big hole in the middle of the plan. You didn't change the zoning, you didn't change the site plan, you changed nothing on the past and now extant approval on this piece of property. So you removed the center of it, and I don't say that critically. I know for a fact that everyone was doing cartwheels to get Banner here. It's a good use. We tried to get them to go to one of the end pieces instead of in the middle. They wouldn't do that. So we now come before you with a requirement that we integrate, but with action by Gilbert that removed the centerpiece of our integration. So as we focus tonight on this case, my plea to you is you have got to take into account we're playing the hand we've been dealt, and the city of Gilbert dealt us that hand. We're doing the best we can. If, for example, and I think we do meet the integration requirements, but if we don't do them to your full satisfaction, it is because we've been handicapped with the approval of Banner. Now, I feel like I'm lecturing. Let me get off and discuss now the merits of the case. Again, by way of prefatory remarks, I do want you to note that we are not changing the current underlying zoning, and that the specific plan, the square footage, the parking ratios, the building height, and all the other relevant and applicable zoning standards will be within the guideline established by the RC PAD zoning district and the town code. Now, we have 3 new exhibits that we are providing you in response to some of the questions some of you raised at the last time when we were continued. Basically, we have 3 new exhibits. These exhibits have been prepared in response to your feedback and add significantly to the quality of the property. Shown before you is the revised wall site plan. The concern that many of you had was that the wall that we had around the project was a significant barrier to integration. And there were several of you that raised concerns about this. We listened and have responded. In addition to providing more landscaping, we've revised the wall site plans. Now we show a 3-foot solid screen wall to screen the parking areas along Palm and Civic. They're in the red lines. I apologize, that's a little hard to see, but Dennis is showing you where the red lines are located, all right? And then that's where we have the 3-foot solid screen wall. And then we've got a 6-foot wrought iron fence with columns along the blue lines, as noted. So you will note that on this site plan that the buildings fronting along Civic and Palm will no longer have fencing in front of them as previously shown. Again, several of you raised this as a concern and as a design feature that militated against integration. We've changed that. Attached, we're also showing 2 additional exhibits that show how the wall and fencing will work with the buildings and parking areas. There is a street front facing building elevation. You showing that, Dennis? There, okay. And an illustrative images regarding the pedestrian entry node areas. These areas are noted with asterisks along Civic and Palm. So bottom line, what does this do? Does it make any difference? We submit it makes a significant difference and again is responsive to your direction. We end up now with shaded seating areas, canopy shade trees in the street gates, wider sidewalk at the building entrance area, a round planter pot on top of the entry columns, accent entry columns, thorny plants to be utilized by the patios. One comment we got was, are we complying with SEPTED? This is the SEPTED principle. Self-latching and locking pedestrian gates to the building units. Importantly, we now have full view fencing and gates with accent themed pilaster columns. And lastly, our fence wall is now undulating to create visual interest and shadow lines. That and the additional landscaping are the changes we have made from the plan left from when we appeared before you previously. Now, importantly, and you will hear this often in the course of my presentation, the current proposal contemplates the exact same mix of uses, except it will be a primarily horizontal integration rather than a vertical integration. Otherwise, the density and height are all reduced substantially over what is now approved. And Dennis, if you'd throw up, the staff went through it rather quickly, but we'd like to show you what's approved on the site right now currently. I know this is a bit redundant, my apologies. There, thank you. That's the plan that's approved. That's what your ordinance says. We're changing that to have a more realistic integration horizontally rather than vertically. And we are reducing the height from 5 and 6 stories to 2 and 3 stories and reducing the units to 256, where more than 1,200 was approved before. In fairness, that juxtaposition is not entirely fair because that 1,200 units plus was over the whole 3 parcels. We're only a third of those parcels. This is a much more realistic plan that we are now proposing. But many of the elements that were integral to the original 2005 concept plan still are in effect. We have multifamily uses. We're at 19.37 dwelling units. We are minimizing and strategically using fences. We're enhancing the municipal park and open space. We have pedestrian connections, paths and trails, vehicular connections, and we are completing Palm Street. The overall proposal reduces the number of units in a substantial way, both height and intensity. Now, one of the criticisms that continues to linger and is inaccurate in the staff report, the staff says, well, this proposal reduces the amount of retail that we will have on this site. We point out to you that's plain wrong. We are proposing virtually the same amount of retail square footage at the corner of our parcel, Gilbert and Warner, as was approved originally. So you can't fault us for reducing the retail. We're providing virtually the exact same amount. Now, let's talk about integration. I'd like to lay a little bit of a observation predicate for this discussion. First of all, you changed, for us at least, what was fairly recently, your requirements for satisfying what you require for a conditional use permit by way of integration. When we filed this case, you had 4 requirements. We easily meet those 4. It's taken quite a while to bring this case to the point of a hearing, but when we filed, you only had 4 requirements. I am suggesting that tonight you should judge this case on the 4 requirements that we faced when we filed it. That's only fair. And let me go through those requirements very quickly. This is a little bit what makes this presentation a bit longer than it should be. But remember, you now have 8 requirements, where before it was just the 4 old ones. Let me just quickly go through the original 4. We meet these with room to spare. In fact, I'm sorry, got ahead of myself just a bit. Let me talk about how we are integrating this site. Okay, I'm going to go through these very quickly. First of all, we're providing a health and wellness path. This decomposed granite path is located between Banner and Alliance. It replaces the roadway that was here before. One talks about integration. We are now integrated. We have a health and wellness path right adjacent to Banner. Banner can use it, we can use it, instead of a roadway that separates us from them. This is a corridor 10-foot wide pedestrian meandering pathway and 10 feet of landscaping. It is adorned with shade trees and enhances the compatibility and integration between us and Banner significantly. We are completing Palm Street. Palm Street basically connects our site with the rest of the 2 parcels. Currently, Palm Street doesn't go through. There was no requirement that Banner put Palm Street through. So by putting Palm Street through, we are effectuating an integration. We are also providing architectural integration. We've had a hearing before the Design Review Board. We had, frankly, originally kind of a Santa Barbara-esque elevation. They didn't like that, wanted us to integrate more with the Banner Hospital and with the City Hall. We have done that. We are also having a coordinated, integrated building accent materials. Our landscape palette will be integrated. It ties in with Banner, the city building, and we will carry that theme through not only on this parcel, but on the retail parcel at the immediate corner in Gilbert and Warner. Our signage will be coordinated at the corners. And lastly, we are providing an integration between us and Banner on the parking lots that in the vicinity that Dennis is pointing out now. Currently, there is no connection between any of the properties we control and own and Banner. You'll recall they wanted to be sole, apart, and separate. We've gone back to Banner and said, we think it would be in our mutual best interest if we had more integration between the two projects. We're here with a letter of support from them and, importantly, a willingness to integrate. If this case is not approved, there will virtually be no integration between Banner Health parcel and the two parcels that we own, the retail at the immediate corner of Gilbert and Warner and the parcel that is the subject of this zoning case. So we are going to jump right over now to the use permit. Under your old standard, you had 4 requirements. Let me just briefly review them. The proposed use cannot be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare. It's axiomatic that we comply with that. I don't intend to regale you with any details on that, given the obvious fact we meet that, and vindicated by the fact we have virtually, at least to my knowledge, no neighbors in opposition. 2, the proposed use conforms with the purposes, intent, and policies of the general plan. Well, we conform to the general plan. I have 9 instances of where we conform to the general plan. Let me pick just a few highlights. General plan requires a community for live, work, and play. There's no opportunity without multifamily for the live part of the live, work, and play. Goal 4 is the diversity of quality housing types. Without multifamily, that goal cannot be met. And then high-density housing is encouraged near large employment centers and/or transportation corridors. And lastly, you have a goal to promote infill development. So we meet your second requirement. The third requirement is the use has to conform to the zoning code. This does. And 4, the proposed uses cannot unreasonably interfere with the use and enjoyment of nearby properties. We enhance the use and enjoyment of nearby properties. We connect them and integrate them. Those are your 4 requirements. We meet all 4 of them. Those are the requirements I submit that we should be judged by. Again, since filing this application, you have adopted 4 more, and I'm going to try to go through these very quickly. We believe we satisfy these requirements as well. 1, there has to be a mixed use. Importantly, this mixed use can be either horizontal or vertical. We don't have vertical, but we clearly have horizontal. The overall remaining property, including Banner, is divided into 3 similar-sized parcels that are interconnected by roads, paths, trails, common landscape, streetscape, lighting, and architectural character. So we meet item number 1. Item 2, I know this is a little bit boring, and I don't know how to spice it up. I usually tell a joke about this point of the way through, but I can't find one that has anything to do with conditional use permits. All right, item 2, you have to have sustainability and lessen the dependence on the automobile and reduce the impacts on the natural environment. Parking must meet the code. We meet the code, we have extra parking, we are reducing the dependence on the automobile by connecting Banner and our retail site. We're reducing and getting rid of the road that separates Banner and the proposed multifamily parcel, allowing, again, less of a dependence on the automobile. And also we're providing mixed use with pedestrian trails and the interconnection. All that adds to the integration. And one of the things that I want to mention too, when I skipped over too quickly, the integration is not only do we have Palm Lane that connects the two parcels, but we've also talked Banner into allowing us to have a landscape path between our site and the retail site. None of that will exist if this case is not approved. There is virtually no integration between these two parcels without that site, in addition to the other connection I mentioned. The third point is pedestrian scale and orientation. I think it's rather obvious that this has a pedestrian scale to it. We're connecting up not only our parcel with Banner and with the retail, but we're providing a pedestrian connection for the employees that work at this employment center, City Hall, so they can walk up, basically cross up along our property and now connect with the shopping center immediately to the northeast. Lastly, you require transportation connectivity, appropriate vehicle and pedestrian for not only vehicles but bicycles as well. There is a bike path all along Civic Center Drive. There's also bus stops there. We tie right into that. Palm Street will connect Gilbert Road with Civic Center Drive. The development is connected to surrounding neighborhoods via sidewalks, bus routes, and pedestrian paths, and the list could go on. So, pardon the length of the presentation, but you have 8 requirements. I don't know how to do them except do them piecemeal and talk about them one by one. If you have questions, I can come back. I have a lot more material, but we'll move on. Where are we? We're here with Alliance. Alliance is not speculative. Alliance is the premier apartment builder in the valley. They're here, they're ready to go, they're in escrow, and they're processing a site plan with a design review. They're ready to go, and we have an opportunity to have a fine, if not the premier multifamily developer in the valley. I reviewed with you last time the economics of apartments versus office. I'll just summarize that quickly by saying the sales tax that's generated by apartments versus an office use is very disparate, and there's a significant benefit to the town from an economic point of view on putting apartments in versus office. So there are 3 possible uses that could go on this property. There's office, there's retail, and there's multifamily. Let's analyze very quickly those 3 uses. Office. This location is hidden from major streets. Medical would be good here, but we have a deed restriction. When Banner bought the property from us, we can't use it for medical office. The office market is depressed. Within a 3-mile area at prime sites, there's a vacancy in excess of 25%. Retail is another opportunity. We could try to put retail here, but this location is hidden from major streets. It's back in the corner. The retail across the street is having trouble surviving. At the center that you recently rezoned a piece from retail to multifamily because you knew the retail wasn't going to go. This parcel suffers from the same lack of visibility and viability. I won't regale you with the details on the retail. That leaves multifamily. There is a market, a need for multifamily. It made sense in 2005. It makes sense today. The apartment vacancy rate in the immediate 2-mile radius is at 94.6%. Quite a contradistinction from what is there for office and for retail. So, in conclusion, first time I've got a smile from some of you when I said that. In conclusion, this is, in my opinion, a very compact but very important analysis. If you take and operate on the basic predicate that multifamily is appropriate for this site, and that's what you said at our last hearing, then how do we go about putting multifamily on the site? One is we could come in with a new zoning case, and with the new zoning case, we just attempt to put multifamily zoning on the piece, forget about the zoning that's on there now, but come in and ask for multifamily. Doing that obviates the need for the use permit. We wouldn't have to worry about integration. We wouldn't have to go through this long, lengthy, how do we satisfy the 8 points? Because multifamily won't require a use permit. On the other hand, we can then do it under the existing zoning, which is RC. RC gives much more protection to the town and requires more of an integration that you would find if you came in and did a strict multifamily zoning on the property. Multifamily zoning coming in by itself doesn't require any integration. So we wouldn't have to reach out to Banner. We wouldn't have to connect to Banner. We wouldn't have to put the trails in. We wouldn't have to connect the two parcels. So again, coming back to the basic premise, multifamily is appropriate. We've either got to choose a multifamily zoning category or the RC. The RC gives Gilbert the most protections, and that is why we have chosen to go this route. Now, one of the concerns is that if you approve this plan, you are also approving a site plan on the retail at the immediate corner of Gilbert and Warner. Now, I want to talk about that piece just briefly. That piece we are very close to having in escrow with a well-known commercial developer. I said that the last time I was here. I frankly am disappointed that we don't have the ink on the contract yet, but we are very, very close. And that retail person, by the way, one of the considerations for them coming in is that they have this multifamily, which helps justify bringing retail to the immediate corner of Gilbert and Warner. But we are in agreement that we will come back and process a site plan on that retail, and that the site plan before we go to design review. So you will get another crack at the retail site plan. You won't be stuck with what you've seen here. We did that plan because we had to come in with the plan because of the RC zoning. But we now know that we have a developer that's going to come in with a different plan, and we will agree to bring that plan back before you. I think we have to do that anyway under the RC zoning, but we want to make that avowal to you. We've also agreed, because we've heard that, well, if this is the proverbial camel's nose inside the tent, if we allow multifamily on this side in the RC, what's to keep someone from coming back 2 years from now and saying, ah, shucks, golly, gee, we could not sell this retail at the corner, so we want multifamily here as well. We are in agreement of putting a stipulation on that retail, a deed restriction on that retail, which will run in favor of the town of Gilbert, so that Gilbert can have complete enforcement rights to ensure retail will go there, and we will also, as part of that deed restriction, include a commitment that we will come back before you and have a hearing on the retail site plan. So in conclusion, multifamily is a good use here. RC is the best vehicle to effectuate that and gives the most protections. We do integrate, but we are only integrating to the extent we can. When you left the hole in the middle, there's only so much integration we can do. No one has suggested ways there could be more integration than what we have proposed, unless it's a vertical integration, which also wouldn't connect the two parcels either. So for these reasons, we think we have presented a very cogent and persuasive case that the multifamily site plan and conditional use permit should be recommended to the town council for approval. Be pleased to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Okay. I see none.
Well,
All right.
I know when I've worn my welcome out.
Commissioner Cavan.
I was going to let others speak first, but let me jump in here. Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Appreciate it. Just a couple of comments. I don't know if they're necessarily questions. Well, actually, hang on. Let me go through my notes here. I'll wait for comments, Chairman. I'll wait for comments. I'm good. No questions.
I have one question.
Commissioner Muti. Muti.
Muti. We're getting closer. You noted a additional landscape pathway between the two properties along the southern part of Banner there. I'm just trying to understand, is that in addition, above and beyond what's provided for in the right-of-way, or is that the sidewalk that's within the right-of-way with the landscaping setback there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Moody. That's a good question. It is in addition. So not only will there be a sidewalk along Palm, but there will be a decomposed pathway along Palm. So joggers and others can connect to the retail parcel, and they can connect from the health and wellness trail that runs along the parcels between us and Banner.
Thank you.
Well, I do have a question. I guess in your statement for the stipulation for the site plan review of the commercial site, how are you looking for that to be achieved? I mean, are you just creating a stipulation?
Yes. In fact, I have wording that I can suggest to you if you would like, Mr.
Well, we can talk about that later. I just didn't know how that action was.
I'm agreeing on two levels. One, I'm agreeing to deed restrict the property, running in favor of Gilbert, saying we will come back and process a site plan. And secondly, I'm agreeing to a stipulation to this case that we will come back with the site plan on the retail parcel, with the new site plan.
For any development?
For any development. Okay. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Staff, do you have anything to add, Mr. Collin? Wow, yeah. I guess, do we have any public comment? I don't see any, and I don't have any green cards. So let's go for Mr. Feld when you get your computer going again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate Mr. Gilbert's remarks. I think Mr. Williams does well in his staff report to discuss about what policies of the general plan apply to this case. I think it's fairly clear that the 4 findings of fact that apply to any use permit approval, general plan conformance, what the general plan talks about in terms of mixed use and how mixed use should look and act and feel. Specifically, I don't think this project meets that finding, and it is a requirement to meet all 4 findings if it's any use permit, and then of course the 8 findings of fact that Mr. Gilbert spoke of. I think the reasons why the latter four findings of fact for the compact urban form, integration, sustainability, I think it's clear why those findings of fact can't be made. That all said, Mr. Gilbert does have a conditions of approval he can share with you. Staff understands that the commission may not want to go forward with staff's recommendation. We also have condition language and findings of fact for you to use if you do want to approve the recommendation against staff's desire. I guess if I had a kind of summation point, integration can take on a lot of different meanings. In this particular case, can that site and that site truly be integrated? Probably not. But can you do things with mixes of uses to better integrate these two bifurcated parcels? Absolutely. Can you integrate other parcels around the subject use permit parcel? Absolutely, and that's the permeability I spoke of, how we look at this site plan versus the previous site plan, and the, I guess, ease of which a pedestrian could move from the right-of-way into the development shown on the previous site plan versus this site plan, which clearly at some point is fencing off the public realm to the private realm, and is doing it in a way that really makes the entire site private realm. And I think that's the biggest difference between how one site plan integrates surrounding development versus this site plan, and how it does not integrate surrounding development. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions for staff? I do have one on the main site plan, the one that you're talking about, the integration. From the first approval one. I saw a rendering, and it came from the applicant side, but I don't know if it was the part of the approval package back, but there was like a fence and a pool and a Santa Fe whatever style building. But I see a fence in that design, in a separation. I see a lot of green. I see some nice connectivity. I do see a separation between retail and apartment in this design. But in this design, without being on the commission at the time this was approved, what was, I see a lot of the same spaces with what the difference between this is the cluster of the building with the parking and green space, but that green space still looks part of the community, not as part of the public.
Absolutely right. So again, using the structures themselves to frame the parking areas, using, kind of inside outing the open space, if you will, where typically we try to push for centralized open space that really serves the development itself, versus what you're seeing here, where they're trying to push the open space either out to the public realm or using very wide open space corridors to connect the public realm into internalized open space. This concept called for live-work units, lofts above office, that type of development. So it's, we can look at statistics of automobile-oriented retail or auto-served office, the vacancy rates, in the town of Gilbert. But I think if we looked at vacancy rates for live-work units, I would think that there's not a lot out there right now, and so that is kind of a new market that we would be creating here, and that is vertical mixed use. You could have offices or very small scale retail on the same parcel as multifamily, and you have mixed use. You have walkable interaction between diverse uses without it being vertical. So there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, if you will. The other thing I would just call out, looking at this site plan, I think it's fair to say that you could provide the gate at each one of these vehicular nodes to gate off the private parking area, and you end up with a connected, non-gated free to the public realm. And I think that's a key difference in how they're laying out the street network on their site versus this site.
Right, but is that how this was originally developed? Because in the rendering, I see a separation, public to private. It still has a good visual effect, but still a separation. So I just kind of wonder between those renderings, I mean, are we substituting green space with a fence or a parking lot with a fence?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to think about it is along here, along Palm on the new site plan, minimal landscape track, parking rows, building. Key difference here is large open space track, building, eyes on open space, parking tucked behind the building.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Blazer.
Jordan, I have a quick question for you. I'm kind of new at this. The requirement for integration, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a PAD requirement for these, what would now be the 3 parcels, correct?
So a couple of different, great question, a couple of different integration, I'm really struggling with that word tonight. A couple of different integration requirements, the PAD itself, and then the use permit for multifamily in the RC. The RC use permit findings require the integration, and then the PAD itself was originally developed with this concept of integrated land uses across this larger area.
Is the code stated that? Does it state that in the code?
Yeah, it literally states in the code, if you are going to do multifamily and RC, you have to meet these 4 additional findings dealing with the sustainability, compact urban form, integrated transportation systems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Gustavo? Okay. Thank you, Joe. I guess before we bring it back, Dias, does the applicant have any last?
I know you were hoping I wouldn't stand up, but all I can say is that plan that you saw, you changed when you put Banner's approval. It is impossible to do any more integration than we've done. With that Banner hole there, we're bringing all the integration that is possible. And I think we've done a remarkable job of going back to Banner and saying, please integrate, and they have to the full extent, where heretofore they were against it. So you've got to let us play the hand we've been dealt, and that was a big hole in the site plan from Banner. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to close the hearing and bring it back to the dais. Anyone want to start for discussion?
I'll start.
Okay.
I have questions for the commission, mostly because you were all here when the LDC, when these extra 4 conditions were brought into the LDC. And I'm trying to understand when that happened. The applicant makes an indication that, hey, there was 4 before, and then during the process at some point 4 additionals were added, not because he came here, but just in the course of doing business with the town. It just happened that way. I just wonder if that's a valid point from the applicant, and I'd like to hear the commission's
I'd like to maybe address that a little bit. Unfortunately, this code amendment, I think, happened 4 or 5 months ago. It's been pretty recent. And it was specific to a lot of the large RC tracts that are left in the town, and wanting to make sure that we didn't get this parcelization, similar to what's been presented to us tonight, where regional commercial could have a multifamily element come in and just take away a large tract of commercial away from the town, and thereby reducing the sales tax. So, and if they did come in, we wanted to make sure that there were some design elements that were required and enforced to require them to integrate, so that it wasn't just a parcel of multifamily coming in and another parcel of commercial, and that there was actually some integration vehicular, pedestrian, building, use, et cetera. And we had lots of discussion about this. And it's unfortunate that this all happened during the applicant's process. Unfortunately, that happens across the cities. I mean, it's not selective only to Gilbert. It's not selective only to this case either. So it's unfortunate that that's just the hand that's been dealt in this particular instance. It complicates it by the piece that's in the middle. But nevertheless, those standards are still code, and we're still required as a planning commission to review and enforce them.
Thank you. Commissioner Cavaney?
Right. So, we're just in comments now, right? Not questions for staff anymore?
Yeah, it's close
Okay,
to
I'm
the
going to
dais.
comment. So no questions for you, Jordan, so just let you know. All right, so it's been said several times tonight by the applicant that this challenge was created by the commission. Now, I wasn't on the commission at the time that Banner was approved, but I just want to make sure it's clear that the Planning Commission didn't propose Banner, and I would imagine that those commissioners at that time assumed that the same landowner who still owns the land today would get creative and be able to accomplish what was required on the parcel. So I don't think it's fair to say the commission created this problem. I think they were trying to help the developer get something that was a viable use at the time and fit within RC. And so I just want to say that out of the gate, because I think that's kind of unfair to say. Second of all, it was pointed out that mixed use cannot be mixed use without residential, and that's very true. I would want to also add that mixed use cannot be mixed use without commercial. And what we're looking at tonight is a very simple case in my mind. We have RC zoning on a subject parcel, and keep in mind the subject parcel is the southeast parcel only. That RC zoning requires mixed use by code, which I've just reviewed again tonight, if there is a residential component. What is being proposed is nothing more than a standard apartment complex. The efforts to integrate are limited at best and really, in my mind, not substantial. They don't create any vertical or, in my mind, substantial horizontal integration. So to me, it's really that simple. I know that the applicant has a desire to put this multifamily there, and they have done what they feel they can to accomplish some horizontal integration, but in my mind, it isn't sufficient. It doesn't meet the intent. And so I don't think there's much more to say beyond that. And I think on the 4 first findings that were mentioned, the one that you mentioned that didn't strike me as being met is conforming to the zoning code, because this doesn't conform to the zoning code. And then in the 4 additionals, it clearly does not, in my mind, conform in any fashion to the mixed use integration. So, done.
Okay. Commissioner Whitman.
I agree with Commissioner Cavaney. The point, frankly, I was hoping, based on our discussion last month and our generic support of multifamily at this particular location, that maybe the applicant would have come back with, and I probably shouldn't say this, but a traditional zoning case where you come back with specific multifamily request, leave the commercial out of it, leave the use permit out of it, and come back with a rezoning from RC to the multifamily. Unfortunately, with this particular case, using the applicant's terms, we're handicapped. We're handicapped by the existing code in place and the requirements that are enforced, or we're required to enforce as part of the use permit standards. And because of that, in reviewing the case, the multifamily piece, with those standards, I don't believe that this particular project meets the intent of those standards. Again, I'm sympathetic to the applicant because, number one, we've told you we don't mind the multifamily. The use isn't the issue. The issue is our handicap based on current code and this particular parcel. And I think that I don't know, I can't speak for the other commissioners, but if the case had come in and it was a straight multifamily case, you were looking at it specifically as a multifamily case at that particular location. We don't have the stipulations and the zoning requirements to meet the other standards. In this particular instance, unfortunately, we do. And so that's where it becomes a little more complicated. And getting the fact that there's a hole, as the applicant describes, in the middle of the parcel, completely get that. But I think that there are ways to design around that. And to make this parcel more integrated. And to be frank, I mean, the multifamily request on this parcel in the RC is what's causing the issue. It isn't the RC that's causing the issue. This particular parcel doesn't need to be mixed use. It could be all commercial, it could be all office, it could be obviously not medical, but it has other uses that are permitted. The multifamily in the regional commercial with the use permit is what's causing the difficulty. And so for those reasons, I can't support the application as presented tonight under this application. Again, the use isn't the issue, but unfortunately, it ends up being the issue when we're handicapped by the constraints of the use permit standards.
Commissioner Blazer.
I'm torn because I hear and understand, and I appreciate Commissioner Whitman's comments. I look at that parcel, and it's hard for me to see anything else going there and being developed there. It's kind of pigeonholed in kind of off the main corridor. And so I don't think the use is the issue here. I think the applicant has made strides towards meeting the intent by all but guaranteeing with a deed restriction that the retail development will happen eventually, whether or not it's this development that or this developer that may be in escrow or may not be. With the deed restriction, it seems like we would meet the intent of the restrictions that were placed based on Commissioner Whitman's take on swooping in and taking away retail space, reducing sales tax. But if the applicant is willing to guarantee that on the adjacent property there will be the retail developed, I think the intent is being met. But I'm also, I recognize that we're bound by code and we can't completely disregard it. My fear is that if we just say no, will that land ever get developed? It may continue to sit vacant. So that's where I stand.
Thank you. Commissioner Muti.
So I'm probably less torn. I do think it's a good use for the property. As I understand the code, a lot of the conditions are abstract and subjective terms and thoughts. And so the rigidity or the severity with which we interpret or hold an applicant to those abstract concepts, I think is within our abilities to judge. And so is there some integration? Yes. Is it as integrated as it was previously conceived when it was a much larger parcel? No. But I think the interpretation of the code has to be in the context of the current conditions. And the current condition is we have two parcels that neither together nor separately total 30 acres. And RC requires that a parcel be 30 acres. So I feel like we're dealing with a code that doesn't really apply to these parcels, that has room for interpretation, and that we do have the flexibility to lean very severe or more lenient. So from those cases, I look at the four conditions, the four original conditions, and then the four additional findings. I think that the buckets of challenges fall into the subjective abstract, which we can all have our own opinions on. I think there's some talk about traffic concerns, and connectivity, which I don't agree with some of the arguments made. I think by reducing the total number of multifamily units by almost 80%, you've got to be making traffic better than what it was going to be. And then there's the connectivity, which when you have two parcels that are separated, there's only so much connectivity physically possible. So I have a hard time finding, outside of these subjective, abstract code issues, anything that we can't live with the current application.
Thank you. Commissioner Sippel?
I appreciate what the commissioner just shared, and I think it actually gives credence to what Commissioner Whitman said. Is had this come to us in a different format, we may be able to have some different conversations. I agree with Commissioner Cavey on his thoughts and his direction with this. And I'm mindful on that this is really a recommendation body, right? Where we're making a recommendation to Town Council, but not for this one.
Chairman and Commissioners, you were asked this evening for a decision on the use permit and a recommendation on zoning.
Okay. Well, that helps with the decision process as well. So thank you for that piece. So at this point, I'd be in agreement to not approve as it's currently presented to us. So thank you.
Okay. I have a lot of different ways looking at this site. I go back to our original site plan that were tied to the amendment. I see it as a good plan, and of course we all wish it would have gone that way because we would have a nice product. And this plan was developed before we had our integration issues or standards with the RC. And so you start with that, and then you're holding to this design, and then you take out a chunk where the integration between multifamily and the office retail space happens. You cut that out of the site plan, and that's now where Banner is. So now you have a decision to make. How do you start to integrate once we add these 4 stipulations? There's things that have been brought up prior last month of materials, signage, building heights, how it integrates into the street. I do appreciate how the applicant has been brought in to try to bring the public a little more into the site a little bit. We still have some separation with the walls, but they're lower. Still, you have this visual sight line, which kind of steers back to the original site plan. The pedestrian connections, I believe, are there. I have an issue a little bit with the commercial and how we're dealing with a stipulated idea of a stipulated review, I guess would be how it would be put. But it does bring it back in front of us. It does allow us to hash out all this integration one more time. So overall, I think the integration has been brought together in a different way, in an abstract way, with connections and with materials where I think in a development that is not on a main street, that is, if we were talking about this right on the corner of Warner and Gilbert, then you have a lot more site to work with and visual sight lines to work on a commercial side. So it being apartments, I would be looking for my integration through pedestrian and materials, and to feel that this is one as a site. I look at the 8 standards that we have to deal with, the 4 original standards. I think we've made it through. I think when Banner was developed and brought in, we still did not have the 4 additional stipulations for RC. So there was no vision of, okay, how are we going to deal with horizontal integration when it came in front of the commission. So that created only 4, 5, 6 months ago. So I think now you have to look at it as 2 with a little connection. And with that connection, I think that's done by pedestrian connections, which has been given, and trying to tie materials. And I'm not so keen on the signage, but at least it's another movement to that direction. So with that, I would be in favor of approving this. Commissioner Bloomfield, you want 2 cents?
I appreciated Commissioner Muty's comments. It helped give credence as to the way I feel. I mean, last month I felt the same way. I feel the same way this month. This is the right use for this property. I don't see any other use really being viable here. I think it's a good shot in the arm for the area that has been challenged in the retail efforts that are made here. We need more residents in this area. No doubt it's the right type of product for the area. Is it as integrated as the 2005 P80? Absolutely not. It can't be. And our definitions of integration have changed. Our requirements for integration have changed in the time frame since it was applied for and now finally coming before the commission. So I think I feel the same way that Commissioner Muty does, is that there is a lot of subjectivity here, a lot of opportunities for us to define how we want to see this and how we want to view it, and to what scale we want to weigh it against that. So my vote is to approve both. I think I can justify that and feel okay with it and sleep good tonight.
Well, Commissioner Muty.
I wonder if we could get some guidance from council as if we were going to contemplate going down a path of approval with conditions that would include some of the deed stipulations that were previously offered or mentioned by the applicant. How would we go about including that in the wording? And is that even really something binding you can do in a motion?
Chairman and Commissioners, staff and legal staff has not seen the deed restriction language from the applicant, which certainly could be read into the record or reviewed. Our planning staff here does have has drafted out conditions of approval, conditions that would need to be included if the commission so desires for approval. So we have them ready for you. I would suggest, Chairman, that we at least give an opportunity to read the conditions that the applicant is willing to offer, if he has them written out, or at least just give us an opportunity to write them out. Mm-hmm. They were briefly reviewed, which is, in my opinion, very unusual to include in a zoning. I don't think, for those who have been on the commission for the amount of years that you have, I don't think we've ever considered a deed restriction, and I'm very wary to do that at this point. I would actually recommend that if those deed restrictions could be worked or at least reviewed by legal staff, and then between now and town council, bring them back to the town council. But we are not prepared to include deed restriction in the zoning.
Commissioner Cavaney.
So, and might I also remind the commission that this proposed deed restriction is on a piece of property not even part of this case. So
It is
part of this
part of the rezoning case, not the use permit.
Okay. So, but what we're considering tonight is just that southeast parcel. Well, it is. I mean, for the use permit, that's what we're
The use
approving.
permit only, and then the rezoning is on the entire piece.
Right. So we're talking about allowing a use, a pure apartment complex, on a parcel where the zoning code is pretty clear that what they've done does not meet the intent. I just want to make sure everybody understands that about ready to do, because it sounds like we're about ready to do that. And I just think that that's really stepping, I mean, that's our job, is to make sure the intent of the code is adhered to. And we're not doing that if we let this go. So.
One more time here.
Commissioner Muti.
I guess just to me, we talked about before about the fun spirit of debate. To me, the intent of the code is for parcels that are in excess of 30 acres that have the critical mass to do the various pedestrian connectivity and sustainability elements. When you start to parcelize parcels in the manner that they've already been done, the current context, I feel like the intent evolves. So I feel like I'm still able to honor what the code says with the current application, given the current context and how I interpret things.
Well, I think it's important to note, too, that the entire parcel is over 30 acres. So when you're looking at it, you have to include what's existing there and not just exclude what the two parcels undeveloped are right now. So the total parcel is over 30 acres, which meets the intent of the RC. What doesn't meet the intent right now is the use permit, well, in my mind, is the use permit piece on one parcel of the overall RC. The RC can be developed as RC with the uses provided within it and meet the 30-acre minimum because it already is greater than 30 acres. So I don't think the 30 acres should apply at all, period, when reviewing this, because it already is that, and they're not asking to reduce the RC. They're asking just to amend the development plan that's included with it. So in my mind, the 30 acres doesn't apply because it's already greater than 30 acres as a whole.
But that includes the banner parcel?
It does.
But that parcel
doesn't matter.
Isn't a part to any of these actions, isn't that right?
Correct, but it doesn't matter because the entire parcel, in order to develop RC has to be a minimum of 30 acres. The entire parcel is over 30 acres. It doesn't mean that you can only develop mixed use if the entire parcel is over 30 acres. It's minimum RC, which is over the entire parcel, including the banner, is already RC. Your 30 acres are met. The question that's up for debate right now is whether it's mixed use under the use permit application. But banner doesn't have to be mixed. That's the question.
Well, it's RC.
It doesn't matter. RC doesn't have to be mixed. Okay. The only issue is that residential, developing it as multifamily, requires the mixed use component. Okay. Mixed use doesn't have to be developed. So RC, this parcel could develop with whatever regional commercial uses that are permitted on it without a use permit, by right, without any mixed use contemplation. The mixed use component comes in specifically with the use permit for multifamily.
Okay. Thank you.
And I know that we talked long and hard about this code amendment when it came through, and specific cases such as this, knowing that there would be parcels in Gilbert that would come through with large tracts of land that would be regional commercial, and that there would be a developer that would want to come through and they would want to parcel out or take a chunk out for multifamily. And that's the reason that we went through the arduous process of creating these guidelines, was to make sure that didn't happen. And that if it did, if there was going to be multifamily as part of the regional commercial, that it was developed such that it was more integrated and it didn't operate as a standalone parcel. And so and I know a lot of you weren't part of the commission during that time, and so it makes it a little more difficult because you don't have the history that the rest of us have on it and the numbers of meetings that we had going through the request, looking at different sites that had regional commercial, how it would be developed, what staff was thinking, what we wanted to prevent, what we wanted to see, and crafting those guidelines around that. And so when a case such as this comes forward, which we had planned on, or we didn't plan on this particular case, we thought this is what we were trying to prevent originally when we crafted those guidelines for the use permit in the RC.
Well, I think there was a lot of discussion, since I was there, about how we would do this horizontally. I mean, we had a lot of discussions near Santan because that's where the big chunks were, but there's multiple other RC areas that we would be looking at. Discussions came in and how we talked about how we would integrate and how it would be hard to integrate a standard apartment complex or a multifamily living space with retail and commercial. And Commissioner Cavaney said exactly that we would have to have some, and it would be a hard decision to make on how we would make these connections and how these pieces were, because a standard idea of connecting these pieces horizontally would be a hard visual sell. And so you would have to sell these two connections by materials, by pedestrian, and it would have to be those connections because of the nature of multifamily and how it's security issues and how those connections would work. And that, again, we were talking through it, that you weren't going to have mixed parking, that multifamily would, as a use, would want to be on itself. You would not want to park your car in a parking garage that also had public people coming to it. So that's why the conversation really went into horizontal versus vertical and how we were going to deal with those, because of tough decisions like this they were going to come, because of those connections are going to be abstract and hard, and it's going to be definitely the applicant's job to tie those together. And at this point, I believe that pedestrian connection and material connection has brought itself together, where the connectivity is there on a horizontal plane, and not an essence of true mix, not where the literal sense of retail and apartment next to each other. And so I think that connectivity and that design aspect has come through on this. I still personally, and I want to know how we deal with staff, of how we deal with this commercial site, and if we don't deal with a deed restriction, if we don't deal with in making sure it comes back, because I want that connectivity. That has to come back. If that is not part on the table, then I have to look at this a little differently, because that commercial has to connect back into this residential for this to work at all.
Are you talking about the pedestrian connection?
Well, I'm saying pedestrian, materials, the heights of the buildings, all those things. When you feel like you drive down the street, you're in one development, you're in one mix, and that's where that has to come together. So that's why, I mean, that to me is the important key piece to this, that we're not developing just an apartment complex under this use permit. This has to be tied to the commercial.
And I think that's what the design review board does and will do, and I think they've already given insight to them on how to make this particular project integrate better with the existing town hall building and the banner facility next door. So I think that as far as architecture is concerned, I think the design review board will be all over it, like white on rice. Yes. But where I struggle with it, and I'll say this for the last time, is that when I look at this multifamily component, I look at it as it can be picked up and moved anywhere else in the city, and I can't tell the difference between this one and any other site that it could be located on. And so that's, I mean, because any other site, you would integrate your building materials, you would integrate some sort of connection via sight lines or your walls, your screen walls, your sidewalks around the property, the same materials as far as streets or landscaping, signage, all of that would generally be handled through design review and would be integrated. So when I look at this, I expect something maybe a little bit more out of the box, maybe some, I don't know, single-story elements along the street front, something that gives it some uniqueness or something that looks different than your traditional multifamily that could just be placed at any other location.
Commissioner Cavanagh?
So yeah, so I have to echo what you said. I was here for those discussions on that mixed-use issue, and very much we wanted to keep it general enough that people could be creative, but also focus in on that mixed-use issue and try to prevent what Commissioner Whitman just said, this very situation. I mean, that was kind of our goal, was to keep it broad, but also give us an opportunity to visit and prevent this very situation. And, I would take us back. The applicant has shown us this old plan several times. Not that it has any bearing on today's case necessarily, except that the conception at that time, if you look at that drawing, there are a couple of different notes that refer to loft living, loft above retail. That project conceived residential above commercial. This is not a new concept for this site. It was actually conceived in writing in the previous plan. So I don't think it's too much for us to ask that creativity maintain on this parcel. I think it was there then. If they keep citing it as, hey, we're doing better than what was there before, I disagree. I don't think you're doing better than what was there before. I think you're actually plopping in a standard apartment complex on a parcel that doesn't allow it.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had a lot of discussion. I guess back to staff first and how we would deal with any deed restrictions / stipulations.
Chairman Naylor, we have other PADs in our community where large parcels do the very best they can to provide a development plan that shows a workable site plan. And then when a real user comes, they do change the site plan slightly. Or a bigger user comes where they don't want 4 to 6 buildings, they want 1 or 2 or 3. Or it makes more sense to pull the buildings to the street and not have parking around them. A PAD that we're working with now, with a different site plan design than exactly what was approved, did have a condition of approval in that PAD that was clear that the planning manager could review a different layout of buildings if it met the intent of the plan. And I think all the things that the standards and the criteria that Commissioner Whitman reviewed with the commission is very true and very current in how the Design Review Board looks at projects, especially projects that need to be integrated, that need to have a flow, that need to tie with the adjacent property in the public realm, in the right-of-way. Our Design Review Board is very savvy and very experienced in doing these things with all projects. But I think what the commission is struggling with is if the applicant is willing to commit to bringing the retail corner back, knowing that there might be a change so that it does meet the intent of the integration concepts that this commission is struggling with, a condition can be created that is specific, that the commercial layout continue to meet the criteria for integration, however, allow a change in the building arrangement. That is familiar to planning staff and other staff in engineering, traffic, all the critical components of integration. So that is how we have handled other large projects that didn't have the real user at the time the PAD went through.
So we would create a condition, if approved, that the planning manager and DRB would, we wouldn't be creating the condition at that point then.
You would be creating a condition, commissioners. It doesn't have to be the planning manager. It can be staff, because staff also needs traffic engineering and needs public works, and we need other staff. It doesn't have to be the planning staff. It should say staff, because we work as a team to make sure everything works.
Pardon me, but that could also be the planning commission. Doesn't have to be staff.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Are we going to vote on these one at a time?
Yeah, they would have to be separate votes.
Commissioner Ayler?
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the entire commission is in favor of the use, and we're struggling with the integration, we're struggling with the mixed use requirement that is on an RC zoning. Commissioner Whitman mentioned, and I think I alluded to last month, that it would make a lot more sense, and I get the sense that everybody would sleep better if it were a zoning case and not a conditional use permit case. And I don't know if we can take a straw poll on how everybody would sleep if it were represented to us.
That's not currently on, Commissioner Ayler, Commissioner Blazer, that's not currently on the agenda. It would be on beyond the scope of what you could talk about and discuss today.
Okay. But I think that everybody's in favor of the use, and I'll just leave it at that.
Chair?
Yes. Yes.
I think staff mentioned that some conditions of approval have been pre-prepared by staff that we might review. I was just wondering if I could see that. Thank you.
Is that part of it?
Your Honor. You know, this commission is good at collaboration, but sometimes we're not going to collaborate and be on the same page. And I think we've got a situation in front of us that we just might not be on the same page. And I'm not sure if we want to continue to kick this around up here at the dais, get more staff input. But on your will, I'm prepared to make an initial motion and see where we're at and go from here. If we'd like to have continued discussion, I'm open for that as well.
I do have a question, at least as far as part of the process of the packet that we received from staff just now. Under the staff recommendations, it says subject to the following conditions, letters A through F. How would those be included in a motion? Are they? I see the written staff recommendation for a potential motion. It doesn't seem to refer back to those conditions A through F.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Moody. So there's two different documents in front of you. One of them is the approval language for the use permit motion, which only has a single condition, which is subject to, town council approval of the zoning case. You have a separate packet that has the approval condition language, the motion for the rezoning case. So those conditions on the rezoning case obviously apply to both parcels. The use permit condition, the use permit finding only applies to the eastern parcel. Is that the question?
Yeah, yes. Also, I'm just trying to understand. My understanding, I think, is that the conditions listed in this report somehow get embedded in a motion?
Correct.
You could just say subject to the amended stipulations provided by staff here today, and then they'll pick up those.
Thank you.
Sure. Not that I want to help out any, but love you, Mr. Gilbert. But the use permit case, the stipulation that they have referenced, if it were me, I'd want to remove the language on October 30th, 2014. I don't think that there needs to be a date specific. Who knows if the town council approves it on that date or before then or after then. If it gets continued, you wouldn't want to be held to something that didn't happen on that night. Not that I'll necessarily support the motion, but if you do decide to make it.
I don't want to jump the queue in front of the vice chair.
Yes. I'm dancing a lot of different ideas through my head. I mean, of course, one, we can just go through emotions, see where we're at. And just kind of, I guess, from council, can we speak about multifamily zoning at all? Or is that not even for discussion?
Commissioner Ayler, I would caution the commission against discussing a proposal for a zoning change that's not currently on the agenda.
That's fair. Okay. So does anybody have a motion?
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move to deny UP 13-04.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Sippel, a second by Commissioner Whitman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Nay.
Nay. That's
Fails.
4-3 opposed.
Fails.
It fails.
You need to tell her.
Opposed to denial, so it passes. Yes.
Yes.
Double negative makes positive.
I'd like to make a motion then.
That was Cavaney, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do you,
Cavaney, Sippel, and Whitman.
Or the nose.
so do I have another motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, Commissioner Muti.
Move to approve UP 13-04 Gilbert Town Center Apartments, subject to the conditions of approval of the use permit. 1304 shall be contingent upon town council approval of Z13-08, the Gilbert Town Center PAD.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Muti, a second by Commissioner Blazer. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-3 with approvals by Commissioner Bloomfield, Commissioner Blazer, Chairman Ayler, and Commissioner Muti. Do I have another motion for item number 17?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the town council approval of Z13-08, a rezoning of 25.3 acres, subject to the amended conditions presented by staff.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Muti and a second by Commissioner Blazer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Passes 4-3 with Commissioners Bloomfield, Blazer, Ayler, and Muti in favor. Okay, well, on to item number 18, which is case Z14-15B, Jordan Feld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Batch B here of our Land Development Code comprehensive cleanup was reviewed by the Planning Commission at its last study session. There are a couple of good points to staff in terms of cleaning up the language a little bit and making the proposed text amendments as solid as possible. So I'll just quickly re-review. This batch only has 3 distinct subcomponents. The residential stables issue, the commission gave staff a lot of ideas at the study session to think about, research. As we tried to look at the issue more, think about every potentiality, eventuality that could occur from this. At the end of the day, staff felt that keeping it simple, just clarifying, right in the beginning of the definition, we're talking about, for non-commercial purposes, and then, clear as day, talking about the fact that the ownership doesn't really factor into the quantity of animal keeping and whether or not that affects adjacent property. So at this time, staff would recommend the language that staff recommended at the last study session. Moving on to the animal services. Again, this text amendment deals with just making sure there's adequate separation between animal runs or outdoor animal areas at an animal service use away from adjacent property, as well as public entries into commercial uses. So we've clarified that an animal run, an outdoor run, exercise area can't be located within a landscape setback or within 100 feet of residential use, whichever is more restrictive. That's the only change from the last language that the commission reviewed. And then finally, both the Planning Commission and the Design Review Board had some good suggestions to kind of lock up this corporate flag text amendment. The Planning Commission was interested in making sure that the mounting device, however that occur, be of some minimum high quality. So we think we've addressed that issue with this language. And then the Design Review Board just wanted to make sure that the corporate flag that's displaying at any given business is the logo of that business. And so it's just an added protection. So with that, staff appreciates the commission's input at the last study session. We've made changes based on that input and would recommend approval as presented.
Any questions for staff? Well, thanks for taking our input, and I think the corporate flag is kind of tied into it, so it'll only be corporate flags. So, do I have a motion?
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move to approve Z14-15-B.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Sipple and a second by Commissioner Bloomfield. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, passes 7-0. Okay, on to administrative items. Item number 19, we have the minutes from September 3rd, 2014. Consider approval. Anybody see any changes?
No, Chairman, I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have this, so I have a motion from Commissioner Whitman, almost said chair there. Second by Commissioner Bloomfield. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes 7-0. On to communications. Item number 20, report from chairman and members of the commission for current events. Do we have any current events?
Chairman?
Commissioner Whitman?
Just a reminder that the Planning Commission has a position open right now, and applications can be accepted online up through October 12th, I believe it is. And so we're excited to have Commissioner Muddy as a mutie, as a full committeeman now, and we're excited to see who we get as an addition to this group. But again, it's online only through October 12th. Also, there's a couple of articles that Gilbert was named in. I think they were named the 22nd most livable city by Money Magazine. And then I noticed a couple months ago, I think we were voted as the 20th best city to live in. So between the 20th and 22nd, we're ranking pretty high.
Pretty cool. Any other reports? Oh, okay. On to item number 21, report from council liaison. Not here right now, but that'll be all right. On to item number 22, report from the planning service manager.
Planning Commissioners, I just did hear today that our beloved Susan Goodwin is on the top 50 best lawyers in the nation. Susan
Wow.
Goodwin herself. So
Pretty
very
nice.
proud of her. Thank you, Commissioners, for the work that you do. Thank you for the deliberation that you have among yourselves. You serve our community well, so thank you for your work and your hard work. There are three comments I wanted to make because sometimes they're overlooked on what a great community we have. There's a fall carnival at Crossroads Park, October 9th through the 12th. There's a youth fishing day, one of my favorite things to do. I'm taking my grandson Friday fishing all day. There's a youth fishing day, October 18th at the Riparian. And also, if you haven't participated in the Gilbert Art Walk, they are starting October the 4th. It'll be the first and third Thursday. Sometimes there's 3 in a month at the Water Tower Park. So the first one is this coming Saturday from 9 to noon. So please enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to adjourn.
So moved. Chairman?